If you're engaged in a risky line of work, should the police care as much about your safety as they do the average good law-abiding citizen? That's the question in part 2 of Cops and Prostitutes, the part that we didn't quite get to enough in part 1, coming up now. All right, we're continuing on with the series that we're doing on Lost Girls. This is the Long Island serial killer Gilgo Beach Murder series book review. We're doing a review of Lost Girls by Robert Kolker. We did part 1 yesterday, and I ran out of time before I had to do it live. So now we're going to finish the second part of what was going to be a really long chapter. Now we're doing part 2 of yesterday's episode. So we're right into the chapter. We're reading the book. I give you select highlights, and then I provide my commentary like I do with the Devil's Advocates, especially focusing on police corruption. So we're talking about individuals' bodies that were found in the early stages of the Long Island serial killer. Now, the first 4 bodies were dubbed the Gilgo 4. That's who we're talking about primarily here. So, on Thursday, Missy and Will, these are 2 individuals calling about the police and engaging the police about their missing loved one. On Thursday, Missy and Will called the Norwich police as soon as the police learned what Maureen was doing in Manhattan. She was Craigslist calling, doing soliciting, exchanging favors for money, because that's the kind of business that Maureen was in. So as soon as the police found out what Maureen was doing in Manhattan, the officers stopped taking them seriously. She was an escort in financial trouble. Maybe she dropped off the grid until she'd made enough money to set things right. Missy knew that couldn't be true. Maureen never would willingly be out of touch with Caitlin and Aiden for that long. So this is the ongoing theme in this story. Police officers, when the police officers find that somebody who's missing, a missing girl, even when the family are saying, hey, look, something's wrong, they're like, yeah, she's a hooker. Hookers go missing from time to time. It's not a big deal. That's the attitude of a lot of police, unfortunately. But in this tragic story, especially in this tragic county in this particular area, this is rife. And again, when you have police officers who are engaged with as customers with those so-called sex workers, then you start to have problems, because not only are they having the attitude of who cares, the hookers, then you have cops using hookers for their personal pleasure. That becomes a scary business proposition. All right. The clerks at the Super 8, where Maureen was staying, blithely claimed to have no memory of the dark-haired woman who had just spent days on end in room 406. People just don't get themselves involved in those things. All right, when an internal affairs detective, now listen to this. When an internal affairs detective took pity on her, Missy learned that one of the last people known to have responded to Maureen's Craigslist ad had been a New York police officer. A Staten Island resident ultimately cleared of any involvement in her disappearance. Now, I want to say something. This is totally bizarre. To be fair, so when I read this, the last person to contact Maureen off of her sex ad on Craigslist was a cop in New York. And this story is full of cops who had allegedly used prostitutes for their own personal gain. Is that the right word? Anyways, this particular one, when I looked up who this cop was, because they don't name him, his name, I couldn't believe this. From what I understand, his name was James Burke. The chief of police in Suffolk County was James Burke, who was using prostitutes. I thought it was one and the same. As I dug deeper, because I wanted to make sure, and thank God I took the time to dig a little deeper, the James Burke from New York, who was last known to have contacted Maureen off of the Craigslist thing, is not the same James Burke, oddly enough, that ends up getting arrested in this case and tried to dismantle the task force. It's a completely different James Burke. Both of them police officers, both named James Burke, but allegedly, if you can believe it or not, completely different James Burkes that work for the police departments, 2 different police departments. And I was told James Burke is a relatively common name, and so therefore it's not that much of a connection, but it has confused people in the past. So I hope that I'm right, because my research tells me there are 2 individuals, but apparently I'm not the only one who's like, oh, James Burke was involved over here with different James Burke, I guess. I want to get that clear, because at the moment I think they're 2 different James Burkes, but wow, that's really bizarre. Let's go on. Then came more silence from the police, more waiting, until Missy learned that the police had picked up a ping from her sister's cell phone. Someone trying to access her voicemail, perhaps. The signal registered at a water tower on Fire Island. Police with cadaver dogs and helicopters searched the area but didn't find anything. At the time, Missy was confused. As far as she knew, Maureen never did outcalls on Long Island. So what you'll find is the Gilgo Beach murderer allegedly was calling from the cell phone of one of his victims, a sister of that victim, and taunting her and basically just putting her through hell about seeing her sister's body rot and things like this, like horrific torturing, if you will, mentally fucking with the victims' families. Now, Amanda, this is a different situation. Amanda received, so there's breaks in the paragraphs. If you notice, there's breaks as we have. That's a extra break between different parts of the story as we're leading through all the different families. Amanda received 7 calls in all. Whoever it was always phoned in the evenings, speaking briefly and calmly, taunting Amanda in a low voice. Is this Melissa's little sister? I hear you're a half-breed. Amanda's father was black. The caller knew what Amanda looked like. So this, I believe, is the Gilgo Beach murderer who killed Amanda's sister. Calling Amanda's sister Melissa, and he's taunting her. Is this Melissa's Is this Melissa's little sister? I hear you're a half-breed. So he's taunting her, and they'll go on with some of the things that he taunted her with. They wondered if the caller worked in Midtown and commuted from Long Island. The calls were too short to narrow down the location. This was part of the reason, by the way, that some believed that the Gilgo Beach murderer who was calling and taunting Melissa was a police officer. They knew to keep the calls short so they wouldn't be traced. Now, one can argue for sure that a lot of people in America, whether you're involved in law enforcement or not, have heard the whole keep the call short. Or you'll see cop shows where they're like, keep them talking so that we can trace the call. So, I mean, you don't have to be a cop to know that short phone calls are harder to trace, kind of thing. But it led early investigators to wonder if a cop was perhaps the Long Island serial killer. And the cops do seem to be involved in the Long Island serial killer story. So it is something that you can see why that was a question, and maybe still is a question. Now, after the third call, Amanda, just 15 years old, was being asked to function as bait. So the police are going to use her as bait. If he called, she was supposed to draw him out, keep the conversation going. She and her mother spent the next several weeks waiting for another call. Every time the phone would ring, she'd wonder, is it him? Is it another clue? Once the caller seemed to toy with Amanda, asking if she knew what Melissa did for a living. So this is so once the caller seemed to toy with Amanda, asking if she knew what Melissa did for a living. Another time he said, are you going to be a whore like your sister? Little by little, he dropped more hints. He said he knew where she lived. He suggested he might come after her. Amanda thought he knew exactly what he was doing, that he was enjoying it, controlling every second, revealing himself with steady precision. The last call came on August 26, 2009. I'm watching your sister's body rot. How terrifying would it be to get a phone call from your sister's killer telling you, I might come get you. I might come get you. And I'm watching your sister's body rot. That would be horrific. And sorry about the phone going off. And I don't think I'm going to be able to fix that. I got to concentrate on this recording it. I never get that many messages anyways. All right. We want to finish this episode for today. The police started up again. This is moving forward in the story to another circumstance. The police started up again on March 29th. Now, this is because they took the break. Remember, the police were searching for bodies. The snow hit in December. They started to call off the search. They're looking for they're looking for Shannon Gilbert. They're looking for Shannon Gilbert. But as they were looking for Shannon Gilbert, they found bodies. And then as they found bodies, it started to get too cold, and they called off the search. And now in March, as spring's hitting, the police are now starting up the search again. And we're kind of starting up the search again, looking for Shannon Gilbert, who's still missing and has been missing for all of winter. So the police started up again on March 29, staking out a 7.5 mile stretch of bramble and poison ivy along the Ocean Parkway from Oak Beach to Nassau County line. The first day, they found nothing, but the next day, a cop driving slowly down Parkway scanned dunes flanking Cedar Beach, noticed something on the side of the road, and stopped his car. Cadaver dogs had searched many times already, but there it was, a fifth body. Again, they thought it was Shannon, and again, they were wrong. There was no titanium plate. So Shannon had a titanium plate, I think, in her jaw, I think is what they said. And so they knew right away that this was not Shannon because she didn't have that. Moreover, this set of remains was different. Now listen to this. This is again leading to the question, are all 7 of the bodies attributed to Rex Heuermann, because he's going to face trial for 7 murders at least, and maybe more, are all 7 bodies Rex Heuermann's? And again, let's make this 100% clear. My goal here isn't to try to get Rex Heuermann off on some of the murders. My goal is to ask questions, especially of law enforcement who may know damn well that there's more than one killer, or may know what the story is and is actively covering up for what happened. So we have to, in the true crime community, pick through and ask questions that apparently law enforcement's not going to dig too deeply about. So when I see comments about how differently the bodies were, the victims were, or how their bodies were disposed of, I begin to ask, if police won't, and I think some of them did, but I will ask, gee, is that the same killer? Are you sure? You know, I sometimes I wonder if they're going to ask those questions. All right, so we're going to talk about how these bodies were different. So there was no titanium. Okay, moreover, this set of remains was different from the first, located a full mile from where the other bodies were found, and not on the edge of the bramble like the others, but some 30 feet from the highway. Dormer, the outgoing chief or commissioner, Dormer knew the search had to continue, but the method had to change. They needed to search the entire swath of bramble, even the parts too thick for a dog to penetrate. Where before the goal had been to search for clues around the grave sites, now they had to clear the brush entirely. If there was even one more body part in the 15-mile stretch of Ocean Parkway and beyond, they needed to find it. Yeah, I would agree. So more police came. Big, huge thing now. More in spring. More police came. 150 officers on loan from the state police, the state park police, the police from the neighboring Nassau County, and a busload of police recruits. They brought in fire trucks, long ladders extended out on over every brush. Some sat in elevated buckets and peered down. Others scratched themselves up in the bramble below, wearing gardening gloves and high boots, using shovels and tree clippers, chainsaws to slice through the brush. Basically a big operation. The FBI even sent in a Black Hawk helicopter and a fixed-wing aircraft to conduct flyovers with high-resolution cameras said to be able to clearly depict any object bigger than an inch, burlap, bones, signs of digging, those kind of things. And 5 days later, on April 4th, they found 3 more bodies. None of these were Shannon. So Shannon Gilbert still missing. Either. Okay, so none of these were Shannon either. And the new bodies also didn't fit the initial pattern. This is the key. Are these all Rex Heuermann's bodies? They were deeper in the underbrush, weren't wrapped in burlap, and had been left for a longer period of time. One was connected to a torso found a few years earlier, further out east. So the 4 bodies were intact in burlap bags. These are dismembered bodies where part of the body was found years before and the other part of the body found now. So one has to ask, does the same killer just put intact bodies in burlap bags at one point and then dismembers people and spreads them out over an area of time at other points? Is that the same killer? Is that the same killer? So, the remains discovered on March 29th would also be linked to a torso found in Manorville, 20-year-old prostitute named Jessica Taylor, who was killed in 2003. Another wasn't even a woman at all. It was a man, a small Asian with what appeared to be women's clothes. So again, one has to ask, is the same killer killing small, petite, 20-something-year-old prostitute females the same one that kills a man, a male prostitute or whatever? These are questions. Is this the same killer? So, so another one wasn't a woman at all. It was a man, small Asian, who had appeared to be women's clothing. Still another was a child. Is the same person who's killing prostitutes killing children? One has to ask, is this the same killer? No bigger than a toddler wrapped in a blanket. All the new finds were sent to New York City. This time the DNA analysis was complicated by the body parts having been found strewn about. Rather than taking one sample from each find, they had to take multiple samples, extracting DNA from any number of loose bones. Once the work was completed, they could make comparisons among the sets, then cross-check any matches against the FBI's DNA database. That sort of work could take months. Dormer struggled to manage expectations. This is a quote from Dormer. Please keep in mind, this is not an episode of CSI, he fumed at a press conference, but reports circulated that Steve Levy, the Suffolk County executive, had given Dormer a month to clean out his desk and leave, supposedly for sharing too many details about the bodies. The burlap bags that the victims were all in on Craigslist, that they were prostitutes, a source told the Post. Levy was forced to issue a statement of support. So, turns out Dormer's being fired / retired early by Steve Levy because Dormer's speaking too much, talking too much about what has been found, and so he's forced out. And then in will come the history with a cop with a long history of corruption, and everybody saying, what the fuck, how'd that guy get promoted to the chief of police? And he'll come in and he'll dismantle the entire task force looking into the thing. So it starts to look sketchy as hell. This guy's making progress, finding more body parts. He's doing stuff in the right direction. Somebody comes in, fires his ass, promotes somebody who dismantles the task force. That should draw red flags. Should draw red flags. It does for me. Online, in print, and on TV, no rumor went unaired. The killer knows the area like the back of his hand. He's a local clamor with lots of access to burlap. He's a cop, or a retired cop, or a disgraced cop. He's my husband, the last of which came from 2 different women. For a time, 4 victims of a killing spree in Atlantic City, several years before, seemed linked. One victim had even spent a few weeks on Long Island before she vanished. So I want to say again, in the early documentaries I've seen about this case, Rex Heuermann was allegedly wondered he had been to Atlantic City. And the question was, did he do killings in Atlantic City as well? He may have, he may not have. Again, the number of bodies that might be attributed to Rex Heuermann might be in the hundreds. We're only talking about 7 right now. If he indeed is a serial killer that's been operating for 30 years and possibly in multiple cities, we may be just scratching the surface on this killer or killers. And that's the big key, because apparently, again, as we've already seen in some of these notes, there is allegations that this area might be a dumping ground for killers, plural. How many killers are there? Is one person going to get wrapped up and attributed to all of them to make it easy sell for everybody, or is there multiple killers at hand? All of these are great, fascinating questions. And to what extent did law enforcement either look the other way because they're just prostitutes, who really cares, or is it possible that one or more of the killers could be somehow involved in law enforcement? And I know those were difficult questions, but they're questions that we're going to ask. So then 2 New York Police Department officers, 1 active and 1 retired, were said to be under suspicion. Police denied these reports too. So out of all these bodies being found, there are people who say that there might be New York Police Department officers and 1 active, 1 retired who might be involved, might be under suspicion on these missing women. So again, it's not just me coming up with, hey, I got an interesting story. Let's see if I can spin this into a story. These are mainstream books written about the thing. There are other researchers that are saying cops were questioned about this because the police have been using prostitutes for personal gain. So police denied these reports too. It wasn't clear whether one of them had been the John of Marines that Missy had been told about. When the FBI filed an application seeking access to Akeem Cruz's laptop, reporters speculated on what Vibe might know about Megan's last night at the Holiday Inn Express in Hauppauge and whether he could have killed them all. That theory fizzled when the police didn't bite. So again, police don't look too far into certain areas. Probably they don't look too far when those areas involve other police officers. They just kind of stop going down that thing, and that's where that story just ends. It just that's where, you know, if it involves a cop or a potential cop or a former cop, it's just not something we're going to go real far down the thing. Even though I think, wasn't there a big case recently broke about a former cop that was doing killings? And anyways, I know that's not the world we live in. Anyways, the phone calls to Amanda had been well covered in Buffalo in 2009, and the media circled back to Melissa's family for more details. This is the girl that was getting taunted about I'm seeing your sister's body raw. One reporter even reached Blaze, who, quoted by his given name Tommy Terry, claimed that he had received strange calls, about 30, he said, over 8 months, from someone he described as a white guy. He was threatening me, he said. He said, "You like to do some crazy stuff with Melissa. I know where you be at." The police traced the call's number not to Melissa's cell, but to a disposable phone registered in the name of Mickey Mouse. So Is this the same Gilgo Beach killer? Is this Rex Heuermann, a guy calling not only Amanda's sister, Melissa, not only calling her, but calling another person related off that phone and taunting them, saying, hey, you like to do crazy stuff with Melissa, the missing girl. So is it the same killer? Just food for thought. When the police stopped calling altogether, and this is, they're talking about how they just stopped looking into Shannon Gilbert. So when the police stopped looking into Shannon Gilbert, then when the police stopped calling altogether, she felt shunted aside. She lost her patience when a lead detective in the case, Richard Higgins, asked her not to talk to the press. So the police are not only not continuing to look into the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert, they're asking the family members to stop talking to the press, as if you shouldn't have the right to try to find your daughter that we're not looking for anymore. Channel 7 calls me before they call the police, she said. If you're not going to do anything, I'm going to talk. So family is telling the cops to basically fuck off. Cops are saying, hey, we're not looking for Shannon anymore, and stop talking to the press. And she's like, you know what? The press calls me before they call you. So I'm talking to them because at least they're looking for my family member. So on April 6th, on her front porch in Ellenville with Channel 2, she claimed that her persistence was the only reason that police has kept searching for Shannon for months after she was gone. And she implied the only thing that had brought the officer and his dog to Ocean Parkway. So again, I want to point out, citizens that don't let shit go sometimes are the only reason why cases get broke. Because again, a lot of times law enforcement they're overwhelmed. To be fair, let's play devil's advocates for the position of why they overlook things. They're overwhelmed. They've got other things to do. They've got bigger fish to fry. And so they might just drop a story because they've got other things to work on than an old case that seems to have gone dry. The problem is the family doesn't let that shit go. And sometimes a persistent family or a YouTuber who won't let a story go will break something that the cops have moved on for because they have better things to do, or because they have ties to the murders and don't want that shit coming out because it makes the department look bad. That was an aside. All right. So the next day she told the Times that Shannon had Let's start that over again. The next day she told the Times that Shannon, so complicated in life, was in death simply a hero. If it wasn't for my daughter, those bodies would never have been found. Everyone has their destiny. Maybe this was hers. Soon Mari was fielding questions she wasn't ready for. Asked if she thought police would find Shannon with the other bodies. Mari paused before answering, she's not there. Asked where she thought Shannon might be. Mari couldn't answer at all. Point being is that now they're coming in like, hey, look, maybe in our quest to find Shannon, this was meant to be that we're going to find all these other bodies. Even if we don't find Shannon, Shannon's life now has a purpose because the search for Shannon is digging up a treasure trove of serial killers' bodies and victims. On April 9th, the Post published a story about an unnamed 48-year-old drifter with a penchant for strippers, said to have been at Joe Brewer's house, the last place that Shannon Gilbert was known to have been, the person, Joe Brewer, who called Shannon Gilbert for a sex transaction, and then later said, hey, I didn't even like her. I wasn't really going to go through with it, whatever his story was. So the story ran a quote from the mother of the drifter saying that she thought her son had gone to Georgia. The police continued to insist that Brewer was not a suspect. So the guy that called Shannon, last person she was known to visit, the place that she was at when she screamed, he's trying to kill me, and runs away, he's been cleared. They don't spend a lot of time going down that path. He maintains he didn't even really like her look. She turned him off. We'll get to that in a minute. Brewer offered no more details of his evening with Shannon, all of which conveniently absolved him of any wrongdoing. Not only did he have nothing to do with Shannon's disappearance, now he was saying he hadn't even wanted to sleep with her. He told the Newark Star Ledger that he'd been turned off by Shannon when she asked if he'd ever come across any transvestites when hiring escorts. Brewer said that the comment made him wonder if she had something to hide, if she was really a man or used to be. So Shannon apparently said something about transvestites. The guy said, oh, well, maybe you're a guy, and decides to just, I'm not interested anymore because I'm not going where the ding-a-ling goes. So he basically backs out. I wanted her out, he said. That, he said, was when Shannon's behavior turned erratic. She saw things weren't going the way that she had hoped for, he said. All of the theories, only this one seemed too implausible for any other media outlet to pick up. So it's Shannon's own fault that she decided to bolt out of there because he decided she wasn't worthy of the kind of hooker that he was looking for that night. So when she mentioned transvestites, he decided maybe she has a ding-a-ling. And so he turned her down. And hey, that was a plausible story for everyone. Good deal. This guy's exonerated. He never really went through with it. He wasn't gonna. So we're not gonna look too hard. On April 11th, the body count jumped to 10. So now we're finding more bodies still on April 11th. The body count jumped till 10. The police made 2 more discoveries along the parkway to the west in Nassau County. Just a mile and a half from Jones Beach, they found human bones in a plastic bag. In a plastic bag. So again, MO, burlap bags, not bags, body parts thrown about. Now we find somebody in a bag. We found a male, we found females, we found a child. Is it all the same killer? 4 hours later, a Suffolk cop had a cadaver dog found a human skull, most likely a woman's, in a wildlife sanctuary a mile away of Toby Beach. Toby. Anyways, I got to learn all these names. I need to go out there and spend some time there. Like Jessica Taylor's, these bodies would eventually demonstrate links to other unsolved cases further out on Long Island. The head, hands, and right foot of a Jane Doe found along Ocean Parkway would be linked to a female torso discovered in Manorville in 2000. The head of another woman was discovered to be from the same victim as a pair of severed legs discovered in a plastic bag in April 1996 along Blue Point Beach on the bay side of Fire Island, about a mile west of Davis Park. And again, I have to ask myself, can this be the work of the same killer or a collection of killers? And does it matter? Well, I think it will matter. The signature of these new finds didn't seem the same. So they know what I'm saying, which is that this doesn't seem like all the same killer. Unlike the women in burlap, these remains had been scattered. The district attorney, Thomas Spoda, suggested for the first time that, by the way, Spoda goes to jail later. Just letting you make sure you know, Spoda goes to jail later on stuff. So when you hear anything out of Spoda's mouth, keep in mind, he's got criminal activity in his future and past. Anyways, unlike the women in burlap, these remains had been scattered. The district attorney, Thomas Spoda, suggested for the first time that while the 4 bodies in burlap were linked, the others might have been murdered by someone else, or even serial killers, plural. It is clear that the area in and around Gilgo Beach has been used to discard human remains for some period of time, he said. As distasteful and disturbing as that is, there is no evidence that all of these remains are the work of a single killer. The police theories seem to be changing. Gilgo Beach and its environs were, it seemed, a dumping ground, and more than one murderer was on the loose. So, you need to pay attention to the figures and what they're saying who are involved in this. As Spoda will promote, Spoda is going to lead to the promotion of James Burke, a chief of police, who will then dismantle the task force and be covering up, potentially, police involvement and the disappearance of women who have been gone missing in that area and dumped in that area for quite some time. Just keep all of that narrative in your mind as places to go in the future. If any casual observers still seem to be fixated on a killer or killers, the victims seemed all but overlooked. So now we're focused on the killers. And again, one can argue the writer of this book, his whole book is to focus on the families, the women, to humanize the victims, as opposed to me, who's spending time on the killer and the killers and trying to find who the killer is. And so maybe this author is like, hey, apparently nobody gives a shit about the victims. They only care about the killers. Well, I understand that logic and I sympathize with that logic. And all I can say is if you really want to focus only on the victims, read this guy's book, and the first half of the book is all about the victims and their families and who they knew and all this with that. But I understand, for me, I understand why we're focused on the killer. We're trying to, 1, stop future killings, 2, hold accountable everybody who has done the killings, and that is where our focus is at. Somebody else's focus will be on, let's tell all the stories of the families and remember the victims. The victims are important for sure. Please don't make it sound, don't get the wrong idea that I'm trying to be callous towards the victims. My focus is on catching the killers and making sure that the killings stop and that everyone who is involved is held accountable, at least if we can. Now, I'm not going to be able to do that from my couch, but that's where my focus is at. All right. I think they will look at them like they're a throwaway, Mari told the Times about these victims. They don't care. Her cause wasn't helped when, at a public safety hearing in Suffolk County in early May, Dormer's chief of detectives, Dominic Varone, called it a consolation that the killer didn't appear to be selecting citizens at large, he's selecting from a pool. So this is where police start to spin the narrative. You and the public have nothing to worry about unless you're in the despicable sex trade. If you're not in the sex trade, relax, people. Everything's fine. These are just hookers. The girls who used Craigslist, he said, are very available. They're very vulnerable. They're willing to get into a car with a stranger. So again, this was to allay fears of the public. You have nothing to worry about if you're a law-abiding citizen and you're not engaged in the despicable sex trade. So relax. Everybody can just relax. They're just hookers. You don't need to worry about it that much. The chief's message was clear. If they had been successful, well-educated, like the Son of Sam victims, all of Long Island might have been in a panic. But these were prostitutes. Of course they'd been killed. All right. On April 12th, just after the 9th and 10th sets of remains were found, WCBS 880, a 24-hour local news radio station in New York, introduced a new angle on what might have happened to Shannon. In a segment picked up right away by her competitors, Sophia Hall became the first to report that just a few days after Shannon went missing, Mari had received a call at her home from someone identifying himself as Dr. Peter Hackett. The doctor told them that Shannon was incoherent, Hall said. So he took her into his home, rehab, to help her. And the next day, a driver came and picked her up. So now we're getting some more story about what happened to Shannon the night of her disappearance. That this doctor said Shannon was incoherent. He helped her out in a home rehab. And then a driver came and picked her up. That driver, Michael Pack, took her to a John's location, and then she was never seen before. So now we're kind of getting a little bit back in time on Shannon's disappearance. Asked to comment, Hackett, speaking publicly for the first time about the Gilbert case, didn't confirm that he'd seen Shannon, but he didn't deny it either. Instead, he said he had spoken to the police about Shannon. Then he made an anodyne speech about the case. This is important that this is done because these people need closure, and we need to find this girl if she's alive. The word "we" seemed to suggest that Hackett, as much as everyone else, was playing an active role in the search effort. The same day, ABC News went to Hackett and ran his denial about seeing Shannon. Of course not, he said. That's ridiculous. It was too late. So he had earlier said that he helped her by bringing her into his rehab center and that she was picked up by a driver. Now Hackett's saying he never even saw her. And so there's like, what the fuck with this guy Hackett? It was too late. The next day, the local CBS News website recycled Hall's radio story from the day before, reporting that Hackett said he saw Gilbert running around at night near Oak Beach, looking both sick and distressed. Please keep in mind, so let me finish this quote, and then we'll go into that. Hackett was not quoted directly in either report. There was no audio or video of him saying it. It was possible that the echo chamber of competing news reports had processed Mari's claim into a reported fact, something that happens all too often in the scrum of competitive news stories. So what's happening is one reporter, which a bunch of other news stations picked up on, said that Hackett said he saw Shannon that night. She was in distress. He brought her into his home. She was picked up by a driver. She was and left. And then that's when she went to Joe Brewer's house and disappeared. Then later he's coming and saying, I never saw her. That's ridiculous. So which story is correct? We don't know. But somebody's and the fact that Hackett is saying we need to find her suggests that Hackett might himself be connected with the search. Who's searching? Police. So is Hackett involved with the police? That is the area I think the author is trying to make the connection. What's with Hackett? Saying he saw her, then later saying he didn't see her, acting like he may be involved in the search for Shannon, wanting closure on the situation, but yet lying about what he saw that night. Shit's just weird. I don't even have speculation for you on it. This shit's just weird. For 2 days, all any reporter at Oak Beach wanted to know about was Peter Hackett. So what's with this fucking guy's story? They're all over it. Mari couldn't help but be pleased, even if the doctor was still denying ever having spoken to her. On April 14, Hackett, wearing a tan windbreaker, a pink polo, and a dark aviator glasses, I can't even imagine what that looks like, was cornered by a camera crew from CBS Early Show. This has been a tough couple of days, he said, with his wife by his side. Did you see Shannon Gilbert that night? Asked the reporter. Never, Hackett said. How could we? Said Barbara. She was missing. Now that's weird. She wasn't missing until Hackett said he saw her before she went missing. So she wasn't missing when Hackett said he saw her. So now the wife's like, well, how could he have seen Shannon Gilbert? She's missing. Not when Hackett said he saw her the night before she went missing. Anyways. She was missing, Hackett said, as if he didn't just say he saw her before she went missing, before she got picked up by the driver to take her to Joe Brewer's house. The same day, Barbara, the wife of Hackett, came out of the cottage alone to talk to Good Morning America. We've never met her, Barbara said. We've never treated her. We don't treat rehab patients here. So she's trying to spin the story. No, Shannon never came to our rehab center, like my husband said the night before she disappeared or shortly before she disappeared. That didn't happen. Stop asking us questions. You guys got your story mixed up. The reporter, Andrea Canning, mentioned that Hackett had been interviewed by police 3 different times, news to the Gilberts who were watching. So Shannon Gilbert's family had not known that Hackett had been interviewed by the police. Now they're hearing it for the first time on TV as they're interviewing the Hackett's wife, Barbara. Ma'am, she asked Barbara, why do you think that this woman had your husband's name and the mother of this potential victim? So they're like, how is it that he even knows who Shannon Gilbert is? Blah, blah, blah. You know, the story is just spinning into this crazy story. What is with this guy, Hackett? They went door to door here. They talked to everybody here, and that's all. So do you think maybe the mother remembered your name? That's all I could figure, Barbara said. She said your husband told her that she said your husband told her he was a police officer. Do your research and you'll know all about Peter, Barbara said. He's worked for the police. There it comes out. Peter Hackett has worked for the police. He's worked for the police. He was a Suffolk County EMS director for a few years. He was a police surgeon. Yes, there you have it. Peter Hackett, who may or may not have seen Shannon Gilbert before she disappeared, who may or may not have changed his story afterwards saying he doesn't know what you're talking about, he never saw Shannon Gilbert, is involved with the police. His wife, Barbara, on video for the Nation said, yeah, my husband's involved with the police. He's worked for the police. He's Suffolk County EMS director for a few years. He's a police surgeon. He knows the police. That's why he says we need to find this woman, while pretending like he has no idea about this woman. Do you understand why this story is here? Do you understand why the author is putting it out? Because again, lots of police connections to missing women. And here's a guy lying about shit, trying to hide shit, who's involved with the police department, lying about what he saw, clearly it seems, and that raises red flags. Would he ever hurt anyone, they asked? No way. He's a great guy. The only thing he's guilty of is being late to dinner. The police seemed surprised that Hackett was getting this much attention, or at least unsure how to react. I think that was pretty much debunked, Dormer, the commissioner says, during a news conference. We spoke to that individual very early on, and he's been very cooperative. So Dormer, playing off that this guy is related to the police department, says we spoke to that individual as if he's not somebody that the police department knows well. We spoke to that individual, and he's been very cooperative. There's nothing to see here. There's no connection between us and Hackett in the police department. And again, if you're wondering what the hell, like you're missing it. Like I'm not making the connection yet, other than to say all of this stuff revolves around police not telling a factual story, trying to act like they're not connected to each other, that people involved in the missing women's story doesn't have any connection to the police department when they do. That makes it sound suspicious. I don't have the answer. I'm just pointing out things that make you go, because later on, as we dig into this story together, don't be surprised if this story comes out and then I will tell you how it all works. Not because I know now, but because we're going to find something out and be like, oh, now it makes sense why Hackett said what he did, why he changed his story, why Dorman said like, oh, that individual, yeah, we talked to that guy. I don't know why you guys keep talking to him. Maybe we're going to find out and we'll be right back to this story. As soon as this made the news, Cher or Cherie, I think it's Cher. Again, I got to fucking get these names correct. Pardon my French. Lashed out at the police. She and her family had told detectives half a dozen times in the past year about the phone call. How she asked, could they be surprised to hear about him now? And why would they be so quick to exonerate him? So they've talked about Hackett. Hackett they didn't seem interested in Hackett. And then it comes out later on, Hackett has a history at the police, works with police. They want to know why the police don't seem all that interested in Hackett. The police weren't talking. Either they were keeping secrets or they didn't know what else was hidden in Oak Beach. And that's the end of that chapter. So again, I know maybe it seems a little light, a little sketchy, whatever, but this book, as well as documentaries like Gone Girls on Netflix, have pointed out that police corruption seems to be involved in this whole series of missing women, that there are officers who use prostitutes, party with prostitutes, and then don't look very hard when prostitutes go missing. So it has to beg the question, how much do they know? about the Long Island serial killer or killers? Is there any involvement? Could there be any of the killings attributed to an actual officer or ex-officer? Those are questions that make me go, this is an interesting story.